Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight and choosing to spend your evening with us. My name is Garrett. I'm the president of 𝗧𝗚𝗚𝗚𝗏 Christi exists to create space for conversations related to the more intellectual aspects of Christianity. We hear from world experts on a variety of topics in fields like science, philosophy, and history, and compare what we learn to the Bible. Sorry, we're focused on Christianity, but our organization is an open table for conversation from all religions and backgrounds, and are welcome to join in, and we are always happy to engage in cross-worldview dialogue. If you'd like to know more about us or look into joining our weekly discussions, we'd be happy to have you visit our info table, and we'd be happy to get you connected. Tonight we are honored to have Dr. Frank Turek giving his talk, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Dr. Turek earned his doctorate from Southern Evangelical Seminary. He's a speaker, Christian apologist, radio show host, and co-author of his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, along with several other books that you can find at the book table outside. Tonight he'll be speaking for about an hour and a half, after which we'll have 30 minutes of open Q&A, where we'll have a microphone down here. You'll be able to come down and ask any questions you might have. We ask that if you need to leave the theater during the event for any reason, just please use the doors in the back there. And without further ado, please welcome Dr. Frank Turek.
Thank you, Garrett. Good evening, Wildcats. Let's go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Mansour is a United States Navy SEAL operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Mansour is standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position next to him. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Mansour and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Mansour in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick it up and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two teammates lying on the roof will surely die. Mansour yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Mansour is dead. His two teammates lying on the roof receive only minor injuries because Mansour's body muffled the blast. One of the survivors said at Mansour's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush invited Mansour's parents into the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even hear the citation without breaking down. Since then, Mansour's high school in Garden Grove, California built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Mansour Memorial Stadium. The golden trident that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Mansour, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, 𝗧𝗜𝗚𝗏𝗏 class. This is Mansour's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship, named in honor of her fallen son. Now, why did they do this? because Michael Monsoor literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. Michael Monsoor sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anyone sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But in today's culture, many people don't think the story's true. They think it's invented. They think it was written down by religious people, so how can you trust what they say? And by the way, it has miracles in it, like a resurrection. We don't believe in miracles anymore. How can we believe in such a story? Well, I actually think it's fairly easy to show that Christianity is true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes. And if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Now that is some pretty groovin' music, isn't it? Yeah. That is actually from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday nights on DirecTV channel 378. It's also on Roku. It's also on our website. It's streamed live at 9 p.m. And then we're on radio every Saturday morning at a bunch of stations around the country at 10 a.m. But I know if you're a college student, you don't get up until the crack of noon on Saturday, so that's okay. It's podcasted. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. You can listen to it anytime you want. And what we do is we present evidence for Christianity and we cross-examine ideas against it. That's our website up there, crossexamine.org. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. This is going to serve as our outline here tonight. First question, does truth exist? Why is that important? Well, you hear people saying there's no truth. You got your truth, I got my truth. All truth is relative. You've probably heard these claims, right? Well, look, if there's no truth, then Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, then atheism can't be true either. I mean, nothing can be true. And by the way, if there was no truth, would you go to the University of Kentucky? I mean, what are you here to learn, right? Theoretically, you're here to learn truth, right? Of course there's truth. We're going to deal with that question first. Second question, does God exist? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if there's no God. I hope to show you tonight through 3 arguments that there really is a theistic God. What's a theistic God? That's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. We'll look at 3 arguments for this being. These arguments are mentioned in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, we're going to attempt to establish point 2 without any reference to any religious book. Third question, are miracles possible? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if miracles are not possible. But I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even atheists are admitting the data for this miracle. We'll see that tonight. Then the key question is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we can see if we have a reliable enough count in these documents to let us know if one event from the ancient world took place, and what would that event be? The resurrection. If Jesus really rose from the dead, then game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if he didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's not true. In fact, the Apostle Paul said, if Jesus hasn't risen from the dead, your faith is in vain. Now, you can go from here. If this is all good reasoning to this point, you can go from here to point out that the Bible actually is the Word of God. Now, how so? Because if Jesus really rose from the dead to prove he was God, he predicted and accomplished his own resurrection from the dead, then whatever he teaches is true. Jesus promised the Old Testament, and he affirmed the Old Testament, and he promised the New Testament. And you say, why? Look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody predicts and accomplishes his own resurrection from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says. All right? Now, we're only going to be able to cover this at a kind of a surface level here, so if you want to go further, if you text the word evidence to this number, 855-909-0582. I'm going to send you the entire PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. In fact, more slides than I can show you tonight. So just text the word evidence to that phone number right there, and I'll send it to you. I think the bookstore might have this book and maybe this book, Stealing from God. And by the way, that book, Stealing from God, actually the subtitle is Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I've noticed that when atheists are arguing there is no God, in my view, they actually have to steal aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed in order to say he doesn't exist. In effect, they have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. All right, now I'll put this number up here at the end, but we're going to start right here at point 1, does truth exist? Are you guys ready to go? Wildcats, you're not very wild tonight. Are you ready to go? Yeah. All right, now whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson, right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "Oh, man. Wildcats. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. You can't handle the..." That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right, let's try that again. I want the truth. Now that felt better, didn't it? Didn't that feel better? I mean, don't you want to just come to the university sometime and just yell at the professor, "You can't handle the truth"? Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. Well, if you don't get anything outside of what we talk about here tonight, even if you're an atheist, this is going to be helpful. Why? Because for me, this is the most important thinking skill I ever learned. I was 33 years old, I already had a master's degree, and I didn't know what I'm about to show you now, to show you what a dimwit I was. And it's so simple. Once you get this thinking skill down, it's going to save you a lot of pain and suffering. Why? Because it's going to help you identify what is false. And half the battle is trying to identify what is false so you can concentrate on what is true. Now, what is this thinking skill? The easiest way of showing it to you is give you an example of using it. If someone were to say something like this, "There is no truth," you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yeah, if somebody says there's no truth, you want to say, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Okay, this is known as a self-defeating statement. What's a self-defeating statement? Self-defeating statement doesn't meet its own standard. A self-defeating statement violates the law of non-contradiction. It would be like me saying I can't speak a word in English. What would you say? Hey, just use English to say it. Or it'd be like me saying my parents had no kids that lived. Or my brother is an only child. Or everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that one. All right. These are all self-defeating statements, and if you can get good at identifying self-defeating statements, it's going to save you a lot of time and pain because there's so many self-defeating statements out there. Now, what's the thinking skill? All you need to do is turn the claim on itself. Turn the claim on itself. So someone says there's no truth, you turn the claim on itself, and you say, is that true? Now, rarely do people say it just like this. They don't come out and say there is no truth, usually. But they may say something like this. They might say all truth is relative. If someone were to say that and you were to turn the claim on itself, what question would you ask back? Is that a relative truth? No, this is an absolute truth claim claiming all truth is relative. You might as well say, I can't speak a word in English. It's an absolute truth claim. Now, sometimes it isn't said like this. More often today, it's said like this. There isn't the truth, only my truth. Doesn't that sound so right? You know, you got your truth, I got mine. This is so Oprah, isn't it? You got your truth, I got my truth. You live your truth, I live my truth. There is no the truth, there's just my truth, your truth. Now, if you were to turn the claim on itself, what might you say back? Close. There you go. You're on it, Angel. What you'll say is that just your truth or is that the truth? Look, because if this is just your truth up here, then it's just your opinion. Why should I believe it? But if it's the truth, you just got done telling me there isn't any the truth. You know, I know this is unpopular today, but in reality, there's no such thing as your truth or my truth. There's just the truth. To say you have your own truth would be like saying I have my own math. You know, like suppose somebody does some work for you and you agree to pay them $10 an hour and they say, hey, I worked 15 hours for you. You owe me $15,000. And you go, oh, hold on, I owe you $150. No, I have my own math. All right, you see? You owe me 15 grand. No, you'd say that's crazy. Now, sometimes it isn't said this way. Actually, sometimes it's said this way. It's true for you, but not for me. Well, Christianity may be true for you. Buddhism's true for me, say. What do you say to that? This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, you should say, hey, is that true for everybody? It's true for you, but not for me, true for everybody? Because if true for you, but not for me, is true for everybody, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's an easier way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller one day and say, I'd like $100,000 out of my account. The bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, I only have $6.14 in your account. Typical college student, right? How do you get the money? You simply look back at the bank teller and you say, that's true for you, but not for me. Give me the 100 grand. Are you going to get the money? No, if it's true there was only $6.14 in your account, that's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to your account at that time. It's just true. You know, I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, do you think Christianity is true? And most people will say yes, and then I'll ask them why. You know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not God exists? Does your faith change whether or not Jesus rose from the dead? No, your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that something is true. Getting evidence to say that God exists or that Jesus rose from the dead. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in. James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called, you guys are sharp tonight. He said even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Do you know that if there is a God and if there is a spiritual world, that demons know that God exists better than we do? But they don't trust in him. Why? They don't want to trust in him. Because there's a difference between just accepting something intellectually and actually trusting in it. In fact, we know this in relationships, don't we? When I first met my wife 36 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. Most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about the second kind, trust in. It really means trust. After you know that it's true, trust in it. Faith isn't blind. Faith means trusting in what you have good evidence to believe. Trusting in what you have good evidence to believe. How about this? You're going to hear this quite a lot. There's no truth in anything but science. This is probably the statement of our culture right now. All truth comes from science. What's the problem with the claim? If you turn the claim on itself, what would you say back? Simply ask, hey, is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove that? No, that's a philosophical claim. In fact, you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy. In fact, every discipline is built on philosophy. When you get a PhD, what does the PH stand for? Philosophy of biology, philosophy of history, philosophy of physics, whatever it is. Philosophy undergirds everything you do. Even if you're a Christian and you're a Bible believer, you need philosophy to even know what the text says. In the book Stealing from God, we have a chapter on science. And the title of the chapter is, Science Doesn't Say Anything. Scientists do. Think about it. Why? Because all data needs to be gathered, all data needs to be interpreted, and who does that? Scientists do that. If there were no human beings, there'd be no such thing as science. This is why, by the way, sometimes you get conflicting advice on COVID, don't you? Why? Because science isn't neutral. Science depends on who's gathering the data and who's interpreting the data. Science doesn't say a word. Scientists say things. And scientists, just like the rest of us, are sometimes inadequate. They don't have the right data. Sometimes they have a political agenda. Sometimes they might have a money motive. There could be a number of reasons that affect them just like it affects us. So science doesn't say a thing. Scientists say things. Now, in fact, if you think about life, the most important things in life have nothing to do with science. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I don't know. Let's run some kind of experiment. No! How about this? You should doubt everything. Somebody says you should doubt everything. If you turn the claim on itself, what are you going to say back? Hey, should I doubt that? Why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You ever notice they don't doubt that? Now, ladies and gentlemen, how many people in here, regardless of what you believe, atheist, Christian, anywhere in between, how many people in here sometimes doubt that what you believe is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking very much. Look, I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning, I go, I don't even know if this is true. Ever do that? But then I start thinking about my doubts, and I realize that most of my doubts are emotional. They're not intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity, I think, is really good. If I'm having a good day, everything's fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. What's changing, me or the evidence? Me, I'm going up and down. In fact, sometimes I meet people who say, you know, Frank, I used to be a Christian, but I lost my faith. I don't mean to be unkind, but since I'm originally from New Jersey, sometimes I am. Do you know what I want to say to them when they say I lost my faith? I want to say, so? Are you telling me because your psychology has changed that God has somehow popped out of existence? Are you telling me because your psychology changed that Jesus hasn't risen from the dead? Do you know your psychology is not going to tell you the truth about those things? In fact, your psychology isn't going to tell you anything about the truth outside your skull. Your psychology won't tell you whether something's true or not. The evidence will. You know, some people are scared to death to get on a plane, right? Psychologically, they can't do it. But do you realize it's safer to fly? It's safer for me to get in a plane and fly to the other side of campus than it is to walk there. Because that's how safe flying is. But some of us can't do it, right? Our psychology is tricking us. Our psychology says it's dangerous when it really isn't. If you want to know whether something's true or not, don't spend a lot of time on your psychology. Spend time on the evidence. Look at the evidence and see if it's true. And I think if you really take an honest look at the evidence, you'll realize that the evidence for Christianity is really good. And then what you can do is you can start doubting your doubts. Because if you start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys ever thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. This is probably the biggest one in our culture. You ought not judge. Especially if you're a Christian. Why are you judging, you Christian, you hypocrite? Jesus said don't judge. What's wrong with you? All right, first of all, let's leave Jesus aside for a second. What's the problem with this claim?
It's not a judgment.
Yeah, if somebody says you ought not judge, you ought to say, hey, isn't that a judgment? Because that's what they're doing. They're judging you. Or you could say, hey, if we're not to judge, why are you judging me for judging? You say, wait a minute, Frank. Didn't Jesus say don't judge? Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, the Sermon on the Mount. All right, for you Christians in here, this is going to sound a little weird, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. Do you think when Matthew was writing his biography of Jesus, which we call a gospel, he said, well, here's chapter 7, verse 1? No. Well, when were those chapter and verse divisions put in there? About 500 years ago to help us navigate the text, which is important, right? Because if you didn't have numbers in there, it'd be really hard to find your way around. Imagine you go to some church some Sunday, and the pastor, you had no numbers in your Bible, the pastor says, let's go about 2/3 of the way in, let's see if we can find the same spot. No, you wouldn't be able to do it, right? So we need numbers. The problem is we tend to think if it's got a number in front of it, we can make it take it out and make it say whatever we want. Can't do that. What did Jesus say in that passage? He said, judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you take the speck out of your brother's eye, you hypocrite, which is a judgment, by the way, right? Take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. This is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Number one, it's a judgment itself. Number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just getting over here tonight. And now you're going, was this a good judgment? This guy's kind of crazy. What? In fact, everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. What? They judge there's no God. They judge the Bible's not telling the truth. Jesus didn't rise from the dead. There is no purpose to life. There is no meaning. When you die, you just become worm food. Have a nice day. That's it. These are all judgments. The question isn't whether or not you can make judgments. The question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Well, who were the Pharisees? What did they do? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They were the politicians. Rome delegated a bunch of the lawmaking authority to the Sanhedrin, on whom the Pharisees served. That was kind of the Jewish Supreme Court. So they were the politicians of the day. And Jesus went after these people. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes! And he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip, and he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. Sweet and gentle Jesus did this? Yes! And then in John chapter 8, he's having an argument with these same Pharisees. He gets right in the middle of this argument with them, and he looks at him and he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you have an argument with somebody and you stop and you go, your father is the devil. Don't try that with a sibling, by the way. Okay? Matthew 23, he's talking to these same Pharisees. What does he say to them? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes. Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No. I came to bring a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. Jesus was tough. In fact, why did they kill him? Well, number one, he claimed to be God. That was blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. And number two, he spoke truth to power, particularly the temple authorities, who wanted Jesus dead because they knew they'd be out of a job if he succeeded. In fact, Caiaphas, the high priest, he knew Jesus had resurrected Lazarus from the dead. And you know what he said anyway? It's better that one innocent man die than the whole nation perish. He had evidence Jesus was the Messiah, and he still wanted him dead. Men love darkness rather than light. So don't buy into this idea you can't make judgments. Everybody makes judgments. We have to make judgments without being judgmental. By the way, I've noticed one thing about judging lately. You ever notice that when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, if you say to your best friend, I really love you, you're such a wonderful person, I wish I could be like you. You think your friend's going to say, well, who are you to judge? Right? Your friend's never going to say that. Why? I've noticed that people don't have a problem with judging. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. If you tell somebody something that's true and they get mad at you, you just help convict them. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. For you military people in here, and by the way, I was in the Navy for 8 years, which stands for never again volunteer yourself. For you military people in here, you always get more flack when you're over the target. If you tell somebody something that's true and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. Men love darkness rather than light. So everybody's making judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? Now, we could go through many other self-defeating statements. We don't have time, but I just want to summarize it this way. Can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? And all the other statements we went through shoot themselves. They're logically self-defeating, which means they can't be true, which means if our reasoning is good to this point, relativism and postmodernism are false because they claim it's true, that there is no truth. They're denying exactly what they are affirming. So you can't get away from truth. Actually, you can get away from it temporarily. How do you get away from it temporarily? You suppress it so you can go your own way. This is what Paul wrote to the church at Rome, that we suppress the truth and unrighteousness to go our own way. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, in fact, when we put the Q&A mic up here a little bit later, I may ask you a question, and it's not fair for me to do that unless I tell you what the question is in advance. So I'm going to tell you what the question is in advance. If you get up to the microphone and you're not a Christian, I may ask you this question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand at that microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no! No? How's that reasonable? It's not. The problem isn't here, the problem's here. They don't want it to be true. I'm not saying it's true of all atheists. I'm simply saying some of the people I've spoken to say if it was true, I wouldn't believe it. They're not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. They don't want it to be true. They want to go their own way. And they think God is going to get in the way of their happiness. Look, some people are looking for God like a criminal's looking for a cop. They're not. So always ask the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? By the way, fair question for an atheist to ask a Christian. If atheism were true, would you become an atheist? Are we just believing something because we want it to be true? Or is there really evidence that it is? All right. So, if our reasoning is good to this point, truth does exist, which means atheism could be true, Christianity could be true, or something else. So let's see if it's true that God exists. Does God exist? I mentioned 3 arguments for the existence of God that we're going to go through, and we're going to spend most of our time on point 2 here. Here are the 3 arguments. The first is from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Now, cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. And it says if the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose. And it says if there's design in the universe and design in life, you, then there must be a designer. Now, these 2 arguments have some scientific evidence behind them. We'll see a little bit of that here in a minute. The third argument doesn't have any science behind it, yet it's the argument we've known since we were very small children. It's an intuitive argument, more philosophical in nature. It's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond us, then everything's just a matter of opinion. That's just your opinion against a baby torturer's opinion. That's just your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. If there's no standard we're obligated to obey beyond us, you can't say something is right and another thing is wrong. We'll get to that later, but we got to start right here at the first argument. Now, you got to admit, it was worth coming here tonight just to see God do that. Right? I mean, come on. I mean, some of you have said, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Check this out. Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big... Now, I know there may be some Christians in here who are saying, you know, Frank, we're Christians in here, and we don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheistic physicists have admitted that the universe had a beginning. Stephen Hawking, who was probably the top physicist in the world until he died about 5 years ago, put it this way. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning. Now, Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God. He failed, but he's admitting the data, that space, time, and matter literally had a beginning out of non-being. Once there was no space, time, or matter, and then it came into existence. Even agnostic cosmologists like Alexander Vilenkin, originally from Russia, put it this way in his book, Many Worlds in One. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup, all right? This is someone that studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, there's two interesting words in this quote. The first word is the word proof. Very unusual for scientists to use the word proof. Why? Because science is tentative, right? A new information can come later and overturn the theory. But Vilenkin sees so many lines of evidence converging at one point that the universe had a beginning that he says it constitutes a proof. And he's not a theist. He's an agnostic. Also, this word problem. Why is it a problem that there was a cosmic beginning? Because if all of nature had a beginning, whatever created nature must be beyond nature. It must be something what we would call super nature. Now, we're not going to go through the evidence for this. Why? Number one, we don't have time. Number two, it's all in the book, chapter 3. And number three, it's not controversial. Even atheists are admitting the data. The controversial part is what caused the universe to come into existence. Not many people are denying it came into existence, but what caused it? So let's just jump to the bottom line. It seems to me that if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. We've got two options. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, my only question is, which view is more reasonable? That no one created something out of nothing, or that someone created something out of nothing? What do you think? Yeah, number two, someone. I was at Texas A&M. This had to be 15 years ago. And one atheist said, oh, I think number one is more reasonable. I said, hold on, time out. Let's look at number two first. Number two says someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone. Number one is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. It's much more reasonable to say that someone created something out of nothing, not no one created something out of nothing. In fact, I said to the audience in Texas A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality. By the way, the law of causality doesn't say everything has a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be has a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. Either it's the universe or something outside the universe. So anyway, I said to the folks at Texas A&M, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. There is nobody sitting here in this auditorium tonight who is currently worried that as you sit here, a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing, by nothing, in your dorm room and is currently pooping on your pillow. Right? You don't worry about that. You're not worried that a raging Bengal tiger is just going to appear in the aisle over here and start devouring people. Why? Because you know that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. Now, if the whole universe can do so, why doesn't everything do so? Why don't Teslas pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? You wake up one morning, you look outside, your Hyundai is a Tesla. You go, how do I charge this thing? You know. Why don't MacBook Pros pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? Could have saved me like $4,000. If you're hungry after this little seminar here tonight and you want to have a pizza, does it make sense to order one? Or should you just sit in your dorm room, wait, and hope one pops into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? No, it seems to me the atheists have all the faith. In fact, here's a question to ask an atheist. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? This is a question the philosopher Leibniz asked a couple hundred years ago. If there is no God, why does anything exist? There has to be an uncaused first cause. Now, what are the attributes of this uncaused first cause? Well, look, if space, time, and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing, Whatever created space-time and matter can't be made of space-time and matter. In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create. You say, why personal? Because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons can make choices. Impersonal forces don't choose things. Like, impersonal forces don't, gravity isn't deciding, look, if Turek drops that remote one more time, I'm not going to pull it to his hand, right? It does the same thing over and over again. To make a choice, you got to have a mind. And the sixth attribute is this being has to be intelligent in order to have a mind to make a choice. Now, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? You say God. Well, how do you know it's the Christian God, Frank? We don't. Yet. I mean, this could be Allah or some other theistic God. We appear to have 6 attributes of what appear to be a being like God, but we don't know if it's the Christian God yet. But if we keep going through these questions, and we realize the evidence shows that Jesus rose from the dead, that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,989 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. But we haven't gotten there yet. By the way, one other point on this. Do you realize that everyone believes in at least one miracle? Christians believe in more than one, but atheists believe in one. They believe that no one created something out of nothing. That's a miracle, but you don't have a miracle worker. It seems to me the atheists have more faith than the Christians. Now, there's a lot more in the book on that, but now we got to move on to the design argument, the teleological argument. And there's 2 aspects to this. Not only is the universe designed, which we're about to see here in a minute, but you're designed. Let's look at the universe first. Scientists have discovered in recent decades that the universe is fine-tuned for life here on Earth. In fact, a number of years ago, I debated Christopher Hitchens. You guys remember who Christopher Hitchens was? He was a brilliant British atheist who sounded more brilliant than he was because he had a British accent. And Christopher admitted that this is the hardest argument for an atheist to answer because the universe is just so precisely fine-tuned. It doesn't appear to be like this could happen without intelligence. And even atheists are admitting this. For example, Stephen Hawking, in terms of the data for the fine-tuning, put it this way. He said if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million, a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. In other words, if the expansion rate was that infinitesimally different at the very beginning of the universe, none of us would be here. Now, you can't make any sort of evolutionary explanation for this. You can't say, well, maybe by chance it just evolved to this point. No, why? Because this is the starting expansion rate. It started there. It didn't evolve. That's where it began. It seems to me the same being that created space-time and matter is the same being that fine-tuned the expansion rate to be precisely what it needed to be for this universe to exist. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered by more than 1 part in 10 to the 40th power compared to the strong nuclear force, we wouldn't be here. What's 1 part in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I, so let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. You can't get that tape measure at Lowe's. Set the gravitational force at an inch mark on this tape measure. I realize gravity's not measured in inches. This just gives you a scale idea in your mind. If the strength of gravity were different by 1 inch in either direction compared to the strong nuclear force, we wouldn't be here. That's 1 in 10 to the 40 precision. 1 inch across a scale as wide as the entire known universe. Now, there's only 2 reasons that that value is where it is. Either it was designed to be there, or it wasn't designed to be there. What makes more sense? You say, oh, well, maybe it happened by chance. Ladies and gentlemen, is chance a cause? Does chance cause things? Who caused this? Chance, he was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. Chance doesn't do a thing. In fact, when scientists use the word chance, you know what they really mean? We don't know. Look, that value was designed or it wasn't. Seems to me it takes a lot more faith to believe it wasn't designed. And you can get about a dozen of these parameters and change any one of them, we're not here. Also, our solar system appears to be designed with us in mind. Let's take a look at the solar system here. Here we are, third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away from the sun, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's a lie. It's too cold here in the winter. Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us. Change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why? What does Jupiter do for us? Yes, its gravitational force is so strong that it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. It's a cosmic vacuum cleaner. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, you know what these dark marks are? They are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Saturn does the same thing for us. In fact, take a look at the planets here. You got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. And what if Pluto identifies as a planet? You bigots. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. It's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun over here. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto? Forget about it. All right, keep an eye on Arcturus now. Where's Arcturus now? Way over here. See it? That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here, look, I don't name the stars, all right? If the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And that's just in our galaxy. In fact, in our galaxy, the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles, and all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, 30 trillion miles, how far is that? Far. It'll take you at least 2 tanks of gas in a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our 3 sons to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get to go to Tucson, go to the south side of the city over the hill. And if you're out there at night, on a clear night where there are no city lights, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night and the guide says, wow, it's so clear tonight that if we look up at 9:03, we will see the space shuttle in orbit. Oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky, about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking across the western desert sky, relative to us, about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up that the sun was still reflecting off of it, and when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. Got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle, right? You'll be here. 5 miles a second. Think about how fast that is. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away, just inside our galaxy, 30 trillion miles. In other words, how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles if we could go 5 miles per second? How long do you think it would take us? Seconds. We got seconds over here.
I made up my own math.
You made up your own math? Good. Bare minimum what? 30 minutes, bare minimum. You must be a math major. That's pretty good. Yeah, you are? Okay. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away, just inside our galaxy, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years. You would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. We can hardly get out of our solar system. It took us 9 years to get to Pluto. The heavens are awesome. In fact, here's what the psalmist wrote in Psalm 103. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. How high are the heavens above the earth? How many stars are there in the universe? The Hubble Space Telescope will help us discover that. A number of years ago, they trained the Hubble Space Telescope on 1/26 millionth of the sky. What's 1/26 millionth of the sky? Go out one night, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/26 millionth of the sky. So they trained the Hubble on this little spot of sky for about 11 days. This is called Hubble Ultra Deep Field. You can Google this. It's in the public domain. I'm going to show you a short video they constructed. And I don't know if you can see this along the bottom here, but these are mountains. This is the southern hemisphere. When I start this little video, the constellations are going to come up, and then Hubble is going to zoom all the way out to 1/26 millionth of the sky. There is no audio. It's just a composite video. Are you guys ready? Here's what they found in 1/26 millionth of the sky. Here are the constellations right here. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/26 millionth of the sky. How many stars are there in the entire universe? Good answer. The number of stars in the entire universe are about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches, on all the earth, times 100,000. And to go from one star to another star, just in our galaxy, going 5 miles a second, will take you over 200,000 years. Now you can see why the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to hear anyone ever again at the University of Kentucky ever use the word awesome unless you're talking about the heavens or God. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome TikTok video. No! What word are you going to say for truly awesome? In fact, that wasn't the end of that verse. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. A being who created, and we'll see here shortly, sustains all those stars, stars equivalent to sand grains on 100,000 Earths, is also the being whose love is infinite. And so if you think about this incredible universe, you might think you're insignificant, but you shouldn't think you're insignificant. Why? Because as amazing as the heavens are, they're not made in the image of God, but you are. In fact, here's the second part of the teleological argument. You're designed. This is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? Human. In fact, let's go back even further than 11 weeks. Let's go all the way back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father. And then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.5 billion letter software program we call your DNA. All the letters were in the right order. And then your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other 3.5, half of the other 3.5 billion letter software program that makes you, your genome. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. Do you know you have not received any more genetic information from this point till right now? Your genetic information has just duplicated itself. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank, time out. You can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this. This comes from our first book, creatively titled Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law that doesn't legislate morality. The only question is, whose morality will we legislate? In fact, when people say to me, don't impose your morality on me, I say, why not? Would that be immoral? Because you're imposing your morality on me right now. You're saying I ought not impose ought nots, but you're imposing that ought not on me. You're doing the same thing you said I couldn't do. Actually, there's a better answer. If someone says, don't impose your morals on me, say, these aren't my morals. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that abortion's wrong, that rape is wrong, that theft is wrong, that men were made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize that man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make up any of this morality. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. The one the Apostle Paul said, the Gentiles are not of the law written on their hearts. Everybody knows this morality, but some people don't like it. Look, if you have a problem with the morality, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the Creator upon whom this morality is derived. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point until right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second, for most anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others lung cells, others heart cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this very moment. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another. Knock it off. Are you thinking about this? Are you going, wait a minute, Frank, time out, I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming up. No, this is just happening. How is this just happening? Aristotle noticed something 2,400 years ago. Of course, he didn't know anything about blood cells, but he did notice that all of nature is going in a direction. You ever notice that an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree? Well, why doesn't it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? You say, well, it's programmed to become an oak tree. Well, who programmed it? And oh, by the way, is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground going, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No, but it reliably goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, and it doesn't, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward an end. That's what Aristotle called the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s AD and he said, this is going to be my fifth way to argue for God. That everything is going in a direction, that it has a final end, a final cause. It's directed. If it's directed, there must be a director. My term, not his. Notice that? This is how we can do science. Everything is directed. Things don't move around randomly, except some things at the quantum level. Other than that, everything is directed. If it's directed, there must be a director. In fact, God is to the universe what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing music, the band would be creating and sustaining the music, right? What would happen to the music the second the band stopped playing? Music's over. Same thing is true with God. God creates the universe. He creates you. He creates the natural laws that govern the universe, and he directs those laws. If he were to pull his hand away, we'd go out of existence. So he didn't just create the universe, he's sustaining it every single second. This is why Aristotle, who mistakenly thought the universe was eternal, said you still need an unmoved mover. Even if the universe didn't have a beginning, you need a mind to keep the universe going every single second it exists. Now, there's much more on this in the book Stealing from God if you want to go further. But we've got to go to our final argument, and that is the moral argument. Let me ask you guys a question. We came through some big games here. Congratulations to the Bengals. But let me ask you this. How do you know that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing a pick six? That's where the other team intercepts the ball and takes it back for a score themselves. How do you know your guy throwing a touchdown is better than your guy throwing a pick six? How do you know that? This is the interactive portion of the program. How do you know that? Not just rules. You have to know the purpose of the game, right? If the purpose of the game is to score more points than the other team, you can say your guy throwing a touchdown is better than your guy throwing a pick six because you're getting closer to the purpose of the game. If there is no purpose to the game, you can't say a touchdown is better than a pick six. There's got to be purpose to know whether something is good or bad. This is why in morality, there can only be good or bad if there's purpose. What's the purpose to life if there is no God? There isn't, which means there's no morality. Also, notice in football, the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. When the Bengals and the Chiefs showed up yesterday to play, the rules were already set. They already knew what the purpose. They didn't make up the rules, right? The rules were made up by the commissioner and the owners that tweak the rules every year a little bit. Now, the rules in football are arbitrary. They could be different. But the rules in life aren't if God exists, because there's an objective purpose to life. If there is no purpose, you can't say one thing is good and another thing is bad. In fact, if there is no God, then you can't say the Nazis were wrong. Why? Well, they were just saying, look, we were obeying our government. And what did we say at the Nuremberg trials? No, there's a standard beyond your government. That standard is known as international law. C.S. Lewis called it the moral law. Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, called it nature's law. What is that? It's God's nature. If there is no standard beyond governments, you can't say the Nazis were wrong and the Allies were right. If there is no God, love is no better than rape. Oh, you may like love better, obviously, but if there's no God, it's just a preference. If there is no God, there are no human rights. We've got people everywhere talking, they have a right to this, a right to that. And there are rights, obviously, but only if God exists. Where do rights come from? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created and endowed by their government? No, endowed by their Creator. Because if there's no God, again, it's all just a matter of opinion. A lot of people who are claiming they have a right to this or a right to that are atheists. How do you justify rights if there's no God? Whoever has the most power gets to impose what he or she wants if there's no God. Slavery and racism weren't wrong if there's no God. Murder's not wrong if there's no God. Rape, theft, it's all a matter of opinion. You say, oh, but human flourishing is our standard. Who said? Suppose Hitler comes along and he says, only Nazi flourishing is good. Why is he wrong if there's no God? If there's no God, tolerance is no better than intolerance. By the way, Christians, are you commanded to be tolerant? No, that's too weak. Tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. We're commanded to be loving. And that sometimes means you can't tolerate things that are evil. And every kid knows this and every parent knows this. How many parents do we have in here? All right, how many people in here are former children? All right, that's all of us, right? If your parent tolerates everything you want to do, are they loving? No, you've got to stand in the way of evil as a parent. Even if the other person hates you for it. Thomas Sowell, the brilliant economist who's now 91 years old, put it this way. He said, when you tell people the truth, you're helping them. When you tell people what they want to hear, you're helping yourself. We've got to tell people the truth, even if they won't like it for us. Well, like us for it because we love them. And by the way, you can't complain about the problem of evil unless God exists. Why? Because there'd be no evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed. It would just be your opinion. Early on in his life, C.S. Lewis was in World War I. It was a terrible war, and he said, there can't be a good God. There's too much injustice in the world. And then later on in his life, he had an epiphany, and he realized his argument didn't work, and he ultimately wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. Here's what he wrote. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how would I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? See, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was. You wouldn't know what injustice was unless you knew what justice was. Something can't be not right unless something is right. Something can't be immoral unless something is moral. You see, evil can't exist unless good exists, and good can't exist in an objective way unless God exists. So evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed. You could put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you got to have sunshine. In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. You can't have evil without good. You say, Frank, I'm not quite getting this. Think about it this way. Evil is not a thing in itself. It only exists as a lack in a good thing. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body, right? What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? You got nothing. Doesn't exist on its own. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of a car, you got a better car. What happens if you take all the car out of the rust? You got a Pinto, okay? No, it doesn't exist on its own. It only exists in a good thing. Let's go back to this one last thing. There's much more in the book on this. What does it mean to submit? Nobody likes this word. Everybody hates the word submit. But let's break up the word. Submit, submission. What does mission mean? It means there's a purpose, right? You're going in a direction. What does sub mean? It means you're putting maybe your own personal mission under that mission, and you're going to use your efforts to achieve that mission. So if I'm a diva receiver on some sort of football team and I keep telling the coach, "Coach, throw me the ball, you got to keep throwing me the ball." And the coach goes, "Timeout. We can't keep throwing you the ball. We got to spread the ball around. If we keep throwing it to you, we're going to lose. If we want to win, we got to spread it around." And I go, "You know what, coach, you're right. I'm going to submit my own personal desires, my own personal mission to your mission, the mission of the team." Would that be a good thing? Of course it would be a good thing, right? Ladies and gentlemen, if God exists, and I think he does, we would be foolish not to submit our own little personal missions to his ultimate mission. Because if God doesn't exist, your little personal mission is going to end when you die. But if God does exist, it goes on into eternity. So you would be foolish, I would be foolish to not submit my own little personal goal to his overall goal. And that is to know God and to make him known. Now, what can we conclude from these three arguments? I've left a lot out, obviously. But from these three arguments, I think we can conclude we have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. We haven't even opened the Bible yet. And we have what appears to be the attributes of the God of the Bible. Now, I know some of you are thinking, wait a minute. Come on, atheists have reasons against this. Actually, I don't think any of them work. And here's why. I can't say anything better than C.S. Lewis. So I'm just going to show you what he said about atheistic materialism, which is the vast majority of atheists today, meaning there is no immaterial realm. You're just a molecular machine. You're just a moist robot. You don't have free will. Everything you think and do is a result of the laws of physics. Here's what Lewis says about that. Suppose there were no intelligence behind the universe. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of some atoms within my skull. Where am I? Thought is merely the byproduct of atoms within my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism and therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I can't believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. As John Madden would say, boom. Atheistic materialism makes reason impossible. So don't think you have reasons against God if you believe you're just a molecular machine. You're not reasoning, you're just reacting. So, if this is true, how do we know who the true God is? What we need to do is go to the next question, are miracles possible? Now you're looking at your watch going, how's he going to get through all this? This goes quick, are miracles possible? Why? Well, first of all, God can use a miracle to tell us who's telling us the truth about God. The problem is, in today's culture, a lot of people think miracles are impossible. For example, Noah. All right, Christians. This is being recorded, right, Clint? This is going out over the internet? It is. All right. Let's try and keep this amongst ourselves. Christians, can we all admit in here right now that Noah and the ark is crazy? Thank you. A resurrection. We have to believe in a resurrection if we're Christians. How many people in this room have ever seen anyone rise from the dead? Crickets. Yet if you're a Christian, you have to believe something that no one here has ever seen. How rational is that? I mean, really. And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? I mean, what is the deal with Jonah? Isn't that crazy? Well, what is the greatest miracle in the Bible? No, the resurrection's easy compared to the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle in the Bible is... I got some of you a second time. Right? The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible, right? The interesting thing is, even the atheists are admitting the data for the first verse. Again, Hawking doesn't think he's God that created, but it sure seems that we get the attributes of God just from the data. That space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing. So if God can create the universe out of nothing, then can he raise Jesus from the dead? Of course Noah's crazy, unless God exists. Of course Jonah makes no sense, unless God exists. In fact, Jesus related Jonah to his own life. Just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the fish, I'll be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jesus thought Jonah was historical, not hysterical. Now, a couple quick things about miracles. A lot of people don't believe in miracles because they've never seen one. That's not a good reason to disbelieve something. Why? Because you believe in a lot of things you've never seen. You've never seen your mind. Have you? No, but you're using it right now. In fact, you believe in it, don't you? You've never seen the laws of logic or the laws of mathematics, yet you believe in them. In fact, you're using them right now. You've never seen justice. Oh, Frank, no, I've seen. No, you may have seen justice done or not done, but you've never seen justice itself because it's an immaterial virtue grounded in the nature of God. It's not something you see. You've never seen love. Oh, come on, Frank. I've loved people. They've loved me. Yeah, but you've never seen it. Love is not something you see. It's something immaterial. In fact, in one of those debates with Christopher Hitchens, some kid in the audience asked Christopher Hitchens this question. You can see this on our YouTube channel. Christopher, what is love? And Christopher, being a materialist, had to give a materialistic answer. So he said, love is a chemical. And I said, don't tell that to your wife. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? Because I got the chemical. Tomorrow I might not have the chemical, but right now I got it. So I love you. No, love is not a chemical. Love is an immaterial virtue grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen gravity. Oh, Frank, there's gravity right there. No, we're not seeing gravity. What are we seeing? You're seeing the effects of gravity. You're not seeing gravity in itself. By the way, that's how we know that God exists. If someone were to ask you, how do you know God exists? If you're a Christian, you know what you should say? Because I know God by his effects. We see a creation. That's the effect. We reason back to a cause, a creator. We see design in human beings and fine-tuning in the universe. That's the effect. We're reasoning back to a cause, a designer. We have a moral law written on our hearts. That's the effect. We're reasoning back to a moral lawgiver. We have the ability to reason. We have these immaterial laws of logic and mathematics. We reason back to a cause, a mind. We're reasoning from effect back to cause. That's what scientists do. And the queen of all sciences is actually theology. Because you take everything you know from the natural world and beyond and put it all under one rubric of truth. So you're reasoning from effect back to cause. You've never seen George Washington, yet you believe he existed. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are best explained by an historical figure by the name of George Washington. The same thing is true of Jesus. He's left effects behind. And that's how you know he exists. And by the way, if miracles did occur, first of all, no miracle needs to occur since Jesus and the apostles for Christianity to be true. I think miracles have occurred since then. In fact, Craig Keener, who's an amazing researcher, not far from here. Where's Asbury from here? Okay, Asbury Seminary. Craig Keener has done an amazing research job on modern-day miracles. His book, which has all sorts of documentation in it, is a hernia-inducing 2-volume set, 1,100 pages. He's proven what he appears to think are modern-day miracles, but even if there are no modern-day miracles, even if just the resurrection and the miracles surrounding Jesus and the apostles are true, Christianity's true. But even if miracles occur today, you shouldn't expect to see a lot of them. Why? Because miracles, by definition, have to be rare if they're going to get our attention. If miracles occurred all the time, we wouldn't say they're special acts from God. In fact, suppose resurrections occurred routinely. What would the resurrection of Jesus mean? Nothing. You go to somebody and you go, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle Leroy just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back. No, it's got to be a rare event if it's going to actually do its job. So miracles are rare by definition. And there's a lot of things that happen every day that are so miraculous, but since they occur every day, we don't call them miracles. How many people in here have ever seen your own child born? Every mother should raise their hand. Every father should raise his hand if you're in the room. Now, when you saw another human being related to you come out of another human being, you didn't go, evolution! You went, there is design beyond this. The effect is too amazing. All right. We got to go end here on, is the New Testament true? We know that truth exists, that God exists, that miracles are possible. Now, we're not trying to prove the Bible is some kind of religious document that's inerrant. That's not what we're doing here. We're just trying to discover if the evidence, both from the New Testament documents and even outside the New Testament documents, is good enough to help us conclude that one event from the ancient world took place, and that would be the resurrection of Jesus. Did that really happen? Because if it did, as I said earlier, then Christianity is true. Now, there's a lot of evidence, in my view, to trust what the New Testament documents say. I'm going to list 8 reasons, but we're only going to look at 2 of them because we have limited time. They all begin with the letter E. We have early sources. The New Testament documents are written early, and the data in the New Testament documents is even earlier. There are eyewitness details throughout the text. In fact, there are 84 details in the book of Acts alone, and Tim McGrew is going to be here talking about that at Ratio Christi. When is that happening, John? It's happening soon. I think in March. We'll tell you about it later. But the amount of evidence, eyewitness details in these documents in the book of Acts and, say, the Gospel of John shows that I think they really were eyewitnesses. Also, embarrassing stories. I'll get to that in a minute. And excruciating deaths. We're going to cover point 3 and point 4 here in a minute. Embedded confirmation. This is the best evidence you've probably never heard about that shows that the New Testament writers were independently witnessing the same historical events. They couldn't have invented this. And if you want to learn more about that, I can't describe it to you now because I don't have time, but just Google 2 words, undesigned coincidences. Undesigned coincidences. If you Google those 2 words, you can actually get books for free on this stuff. It's amazing when you see that these documents are cross-verified. I call it embedded confirmation, but just Google undesigned coincidences. Expected prediction, that deals with Old Testament prophecy. If I only had one Old Testament prophecy to make my case on it, would be Isaiah chapter 53. Also, extra-biblical writers. These are non-Christian writers that weren't eyewitnesses, but obviously had data that the disciples believed Jesus rose from the dead. People like Josephus, Suetonius, Thallus, Phlegon. These are all household names, I know, that you've probably heard about. When you add up their references to what happened to Jesus and the apostles, you get a story congruent with the New Testament. All of that is in chapter 9 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And finally, the explosive growth of the church out of Jerusalem. It's really hard to explain how a movement came out of Judaism when Jews didn't believe a man could rise from the dead in the middle of time, nor did they believe a man could claim to be God. That would be blasphemy. And all of this was predicated on an empty tomb, a man that rose from the dead. What could the Jews or the Romans have done to stop Christianity in its tracks? And they wanted it stopped. What could they have done easily? They could have gone to the tomb, taken the body out, and said, he's dead. Stop all this nonsense talk about the resurrection. They couldn't do that. Why? Because Jesus was still using his body. He had resurrected from the dead. Now, as I say, we don't have time to cover all these. Let me just cover a couple of these. One is called embarrassing stories. Historians know that when they're reading a text that has embarrassing details in it to the author or authors, it's probably true. Why is it probably true? Because you're not going to invent details that make yourself look bad. You're not going to make details that embarrass you, right? In fact, let me ask you guys a question. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good. And it's not working. We know you're lying. All right, how many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look bad? You don't lie to make yourself look bad. You might lie to make yourself look good, but you won't lie to make yourself look bad. Well, embarrassing stories show us that the New Testament writers are not making this up because they make themselves look bad and even potentially Jesus. That's why we call this the duh factor. They're not making this up. Let me just give you a few examples. Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think they invented this? You think Mark at one point said to Peter, "Hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan." What do you think Peter would have said? "Have him call you Satan. Look, I'm the leader here. This doesn't look good." And then Peter says, "Lord, I'll never deny you." What does he wind up doing? He denies him 3 times. And then at the crucifixion, all the disciples, maybe with the exception of one, they all run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away! They all run away. And who are the brave ones? Ladies, who are the brave ones? The women. The women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man here invent that? I mean, I would make myself look good if I was inventing it, wouldn't you? I'd write something down like this. Let's see, we marched right down there and we overpowered that elite Roman guard. Peter said, "Get out." John roundhouse kicked him. Philip said, "We'll be back." And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb, and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say I was Mr. Sissy Pants, why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses in that culture? Forget about the fact it was embarrassing to men, but why would you never say that independently? Yes, because a woman's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man. So if you were going to try and pass off a lie as the truth, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. Yet all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They really were. They had no motive to make this up. It didn't help their case. I actually had a woman come up to me once. She said, "Frank, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because he wanted to get the story out." I said, "That is an excellent point. I had not thought of that." Because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, I thought, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you the nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner? Right? He's not going to tell you. I can't even believe this next verse is in the New Testament, but it is. Do you know at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the biography of Matthew, where Jesus is giving his disciples the Great Commission, and he goes, "Therefore, make disciples of all nations." They're all standing there. Notice, by the way, he didn't say make believers. He said make disciples. There's a difference, right? Anyway, they're standing there, and it says right there in verse 17 about the disciples, some believed, but some doubted. He's standing resurrected right in front of them. And they're going, "You see that guy over there?" "Yep." "That guy over there is Jesus." "Oh, no, it can't be Jesus. He was just killed not long ago." "No, I'm telling you, it's him." "Jesus is dead. The Romans killed him. It can't be him." "It's him." "Look, the Romans know how to kill people. They crucify him, put a spear in his side, blood and water come out. Jesus is dead. It's him. It can't be. It is. How do you know?" The women told me. They're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details about Jesus in there. Jesus is considered out of his mind by his own family who come to seize him and take him home. This is in Mark chapter 3. You may have heard people, the scholars say, "Oh, the New Testament writers embellish Jesus to be God." Really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there, which is almost universally recognized to be the earliest gospel? His family thinks he's crazy. His own brothers don't believe in him. Jesus is called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. You think they made that up? He has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, notice there are 2 prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline. He's the Messiah. 2 prostitutes. Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Do you think that Matthew and Luke got together at one point when they put the genealogies together and said, you know what, I really think we should spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. What do you say? Rahab, Tamar. No. In fact, there's a lot of shady characters in the bloodline of the Messiah. Judah, from where we get the term Jew from. Oh, not a good guy. Read about him in Genesis. David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us then, huh? Bathsheba's in there. In fact, I think it's Matthew. When Matthew gets to Bathsheba in his genealogy, he doesn't mention her name. You know what he says instead? Uriah's wife. Ooh, that's a slam, right? He's telling the truth, but it's a slam. Why? Because Uriah was the husband of Bathsheba, whom David had killed so he could have Bathsheba. This is not an invented story. They're not making this up. Jesus is hung on a tree, which according to Deuteronomy 21:23, if you're hung on a tree, you're under God's curse. Well, he was under God's curse. What curse? The curse of sin that we put him under. But if you're making this up, if you're saying, here's your Messiah, Jews, oh, he was hung on a tree, that's not going to wash. But they're just telling the truth. There's a lot more about embarrassing stories in the book, but we got to go one more, and that's excruciating deaths. Excruciating deaths. This is the argument that says that these men who were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead died excruciating deaths when they could have saved themselves by simply saying it never happened. Now, we have really good data that 4 of them did this. You may have heard, well, 11 out of the 12. That's probably true, but the best data we have are about 4 of them, and we don't have any data that says anyone ever recanted. So why would they die for this? In fact, in order to think about this, you got to remember that the New Testament writers were all Jews, Bible-believing Jews, who thought they were God's chosen people. The only exception is Luke. Everyone else is a Jew. They didn't believe somebody could rise from the dead and claim to be God in the middle of time. Why would they invent this? In fact, what did they get by making up a new religion, these New Testament writers? They're all Jews. What did they get? Well, they got kicked out of the synagogue, and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? First we get kicked out of the synagogue, then beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. What a great idea. No, I don't think so. In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. I get this question a lot. Maybe if you're a Christian, you do as well. Are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? Yeah, I mentioned they're not eyewitnesses, but they have good data. They're in chapter 9 of the book. But if you think about that question for a minute, oftentimes there's an illicit assumption under the question. You know what the illicit assumption is? You really can't trust the New Testament writers because, you see, these were religious people. They had an agenda. You see, they embellished it. You got to trust just the secular writers. If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you'll realize how dumb that assumption is. What did these people have to gain by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? Nothing. They had everything to lose. There's no motive here. In fact, my friend J. Warner Wallace, he's a cold case homicide detective. He's been on Dateline more than any other homicide detective in the country because he solves murders decades old. He's also a Christian. He wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity, which uses his detective skills to investigate the greatest homicide of all time, the homicide of Jesus. And what Jim says is when he finds a murdered body that he knows has been murdered, he says there's only 3 reasons why that guy's dead. It's not 1,000 reasons. There's only one of these 3 or a combination of the 3. There was either a sex issue, a money issue, or a power issue. Sex, money, or power leads people to do evil. Leads us to do evil too. Why? Because sex, money, and power are good things, but they're so good, sometimes we'll take shortcuts to get them. So Jim is saying, if you want to say that the disciples here did this, they invented all this, you got to have one or more of those motivators, sex, money, or power. Ladies and gentlemen, did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No. Did they get money? No, they were not 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power? No, they got the opposite of power. Paul had power as a Pharisee persecuting the church. As soon as he becomes a Christian, he's persecuted. He lost power. There's no motive to make this up. In fact, you can ask the question, why would they die for a known lie? Now, at this point, you may go, wait a minute, Frank, I know there are some religious people out there, like, for example, some Muslims will die for Islam. Does that prove Islam is true? I mean, if you're saying that martyrdom proves Christianity, don't you have to say that martyrdom proves Islam? No. Why? Because there's a lot of differences between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times. But let me just give you one difference for our purposes. The Muslim martyrs of today haven't witnessed anything that tells them that Islam is true. They just have faith. But the Christian martyrs, the New Testament martyrs, witnessed Jesus rise from the dead. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. Some people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. You can't get better evidence than that unless you were there yourself. All right, last thing I'm going to say about the New Testament is going to annoy some of you, especially if you're a Christian and you believe the Bible's inerrant like I do. It's going to sound like heresy, but it's not. Stay with me. Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. You say, how can that be? Because Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection. Do you realize there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? Frank, how could you be a Christian without the book of Romans? Why did Paul write the book of Romans? Because he witnessed the resurrected Jesus. He already knew it was true. He knew it was true before he wrote it. Thankfully, they wrote it so we could know about it, but it would be true if they never wrote about it. In fact, we could put it this way. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. You wouldn't have documents written by Bible-believing Jews, Old Testament-believing Jews, in the first century saying a man claimed to be God and rose from the dead unless a man claimed to be God and rose from the dead because they paid with their lives for it. There's no motive to make it up. No sex, no money, no power. It's not an invented story. So, we could go through more evidence. We don't have time. We got to get to your questions. Overall argument. Does truth exist? Someone says there's no truth. You're going to say, is that true? God. 3 arguments. First argument, cosmological. Second argument, teleological. Third argument, moral argument. From that, you get a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created and sustains all things. Are miracles possible? What's the greatest miracle in the Bible? Genesis 1:1. Even atheists are admitting the data for Genesis 1:1. I already pointed out they don't think it's God, but what else could it be at this point? He's the odds-on favorite. Is the New Testament telling us the truth about the resurrection? Sure seems so. Why would they make this up? There's no motive to make it up. Now, if you want to go further, I don't know if there's probably no DVDs over there. You can get it on our website. We're now teaching online courses on our website. Check that out. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we've actually combined these 3 into one social media platform. We call it 𝗬TwitFace. Have you guys signed up for 𝗬TwitFace yet? It's kind of a Jersey thing. We're also on Instagram, too, by the way, and this is going out on YouTube right now and Facebook. The I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. Check that out if you would. 48 minutes a week. TV is on Wednesday nights. There's that number again. If you text the word evidence to 855-909-0582. Again, I'm going to send you this entire PowerPoint presentation for free in PDF format. And then if you don't do anything else, download the free Cross-Examined app. 2 words in the App Store, Cross-Examined. And it not only has the podcast on it, it has the TV show streaming on it, it even has a quick answer section on there. So you might be talking to somebody and they have a question you can't answer. You can just take out your phone and go, hey, hang on, I'm getting a text. Hey, what about this? All right? The answers are right there to some of the more prominent questions you're going to get. All right? Oh, and I got to tell you one other thing. You're only like the 3rd audience I've told this to. My son and I, my son's in the Air Force. He's already got his degree. He's a major. He's an intelligence officer in the Air Force. He's already got his degree from Southern Evangelical Seminary, where I went. And he and I recently got together and we wrote this brand new book, which is coming out in May. It's called Hollywood Heroes: How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. And what we do is we go through all of these franchises: Captain America, Iron Man, Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Yeah, you'd be surprised. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Now, if you pre-order this book on Amazon or wherever you get books before May 3rd, in about a month, we're going to send you the entire audio version of the book for free. Okay, I just recorded the audio version like last week. So if you want a fun way to see the truth about Christianity, about lessons for life, if you want to see how these movies actually point to the ultimate hero is Jesus, then get the book Hollywood Heroes. It's a fun book. It's the funnest book I've ever done, which isn't saying much, but it's fun, okay? So check that out. All right, before we get to your questions, it's true, so what? So what if it's true? What it means is that someone actually did die for you. When I was in the Navy, I was in naval aviation, and we had to earn golden wings, which were fairly hard to earn. But there's nothing more difficult in the Navy or virtually any military to earn than a golden trident. That's what the SEALs wear. Very few people that start SEAL training make it through. 5–10% maybe. Those that do make it through wear that golden trident with pride. It is their identity. When Michael Monsoor was buried in Rosecrans Cemetery, just outside of San Diego, virtually every Navy SEAL on the West Coast showed up for his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their tridents and they pressed them into his casket. They took their identity and put their identity in the one that died for them. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to put our identity in our Savior. But our culture says, oh, no, put your identity in your political party, or put your identity in your race. There's only one race, the human race. Or put your identity in your sexual orientation, or put your identity in your boyfriend, or your girlfriend, or your school, or your vocation, or your bank account. You know, none of those things are ultimate, ladies and gentlemen. You were meant, I was meant, we were meant to put our identity in our Savior. That's the only thing you can never lose is God. You can't lose God. And the way you do that is you simply accept what He's done. He took your punishment, He took my punishment on Himself, and by trusting Him, you're not only forgiven for what you've done, but you're given His righteousness. You don't have to, you can't work your way to God. All you can do is accept the work He's done. Your identity is not in what you do for God. Your identity is in what He did for you. And this God just didn't die, He also rose again. Check into the evidence He did, and then trust in what He's done. If you don't want to, that's fine. God's not going to force you into heaven against your will. Now, what we just did here tonight is we're just scratching the surface. If you want to go much deeper, take your phone and scan this and get connected to Ratio Christi here, which means Reason for Christ, because they meet every Wednesday. In fact, they're going to meet not far from this room this Wednesday night, and Clay Jones, who is a scholar who's looked into the very difficult issue of killing the Canaanites in the Old Testament, he's going to be talking about that. Why did God kill the Canaanites in the Old Testament? How can He be a loving God when He does that? So if you want to learn more about that issue, join Ratio Christi this Wednesday night. That's just 2 nights from now. And you'll be able to see where it is. Oh, hang on, there it is. Scan that. I'm sorry, it automatically advanced. I didn't want it to do that. Scan that if you would. And if not, you can find Ratio Christi UKY right on social media. And now we're going to go to questions. And since no one likes to ask the first question, let's move right on to the second question. Second question, ladies and gentlemen. And we have a microphone over here. So if you guys don't mind, microphone, because people online will not be able to see you or hear you if you don't come to the microphone. And I'm going to put up again on the screen here, text the word evidence to that number. And if you text the word event, we're going to send you like a 3-question survey just to help us improve this event. So you can answer yes, no, whatever questions we ask you. So we just need one person to start. One person to start. The Q&A. So one atom said to another atom, I just lost an electron. And the second said to the first, are you sure? And the first said, I'm positive. Look, that's my science joke. Come on, somebody's got to ask questions or I'm going to tell bad dad jokes. And you're not going to want that. Yes, ma'am. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Hey, what's your name?
I'm Megan.
Hey, Megan, go ahead.
I was just wondering if there was ever, I know you've had a lot of debates with other atheists who are really educated in their field.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions you've encountered that have kind of stumped you? How did you get over that question? What did you learn from it? Any examples?
Yeah, they don't come from atheists, they come from my wife. She stumps me a lot. You know, when you're debating somebody, Megan, you're kind of prepared, at least you should be, for what the other person is coming to talk about. I will say this. People always ask, what are the hardest questions to answer? And really, the answer is, no. First of all, no one has all the answers, quite obviously. But on the more common questions you get, none of the questions are hard to answer. They're just hard to answer in 2 minutes, right? And the biggest problem in a debate is you don't have a lot of time. Like if someone were to come up here and say, why does God allow certain evils? Well, we could spend a semester on that, right? It's not something you can answer adequately in 2 minutes. You can just give what we call a doorway to an answer, not a complete answer. I think the hardest issues for Christianity would be evil. Again, I already said it doesn't disprove God. But why does God allow certain evils? That's a hard question to answer. I think sometimes the hiddenness of God is a question. You know, why doesn't God just reveal himself more overtly to people? There are answers to that, but it takes a while to unpack. Those are probably the 2 biggest questions. But both of those questions, particularly the evil question, presupposes that human beings are valuable. Why? Well, if you're going to say, why doesn't God stop a certain evil, you're presupposing that evil is something that shouldn't happen to human beings. Well, why shouldn't it happen to human beings? Who said? So you have to sort of assume a theistic standard in order to even bring the question up. All right? Thank you, Megan. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Gabriel.
Hey, Gabriel, go ahead. You're an angel.
I just wanted to say, I'm a huge fan. I've been following you since about junior year in high school. You and Todd Frill have been great in
thank you.
In the apologetics movement. So I had a question about the elect. So we see that in John 3:16 and Ephesians 2:8 and 9 and Matthew 22:14, those who are chosen, but they're called but not chosen. So what is your opinion in how the elect and predestined movement, where do you side on that?
We're not predestined to talk about that here at the University of Kentucky. I know that, okay? Look, Christians argue over that. I'll give you my short answer. Again, this is something we could spend a semester on. Since God knows all things, whatever universe he creates, by definition, he knows who's going to believe and who isn't, right? So as soon as he elects to create a universe, some people are, by definition, elected to believe. But they're not elected to believe against their free will. They're elected to believe in accord with their free will. Because knowing what someone is going to do does not imply causation. For example, say a young mother has a newborn baby. She puts her baby down at night. She knows at some point during that night that baby's going to wake up, right, and want to eat. But because she knows that, is she causing the baby to wake up and eat? No. Knowledge does not necessarily imply causation. So just because God knows what we're going to do doesn't mean he's causing it in a way that we don't have free will. I think God is so sovereign that he can get his will done through our free will. And since he wants all to be saved, and some aren't saved, what's the reason they're not saved? Because they don't want to be. They have free will to go their own way. So yes, we are chosen, but we're also free. In fact, my co-author, Dr. Norman Geisler, wrote a book called Chosen but Free. Because by definition, since God knows all things, as soon as he creates, he's choosing the outcome. But he's not forcing us against our will to do what we do. We're still doing it freely. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks, Gabriel. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Matthew.
Hey, Matthew. That means gift from God, ladies and gentlemen. Here he is. Gift from God. We had an angel, now a gift from God.
This is the second time I've been at one of these, and that's the second time you've said that. So.
All right. You know, my kids will say, yeah, that's the 30th time we heard that joke, Dad. But that wasn't a joke. That's true. Go ahead.
I've kind of got two. The first one is quick. Just wondering if you have plans to do any more debates, or I guess I could say, are there any people that you would like to debate? Any atheists, or I'm sure you're familiar with some popular ones on YouTube, perhaps. But,
yeah, so. I tend to try and debate people that have written something, right, because then I know really what they believe. But I don't have a lot of time to watch hundreds of YouTube videos, yeah, right? So I want to debate people that have something written. Like, for example, I've debated Christopher Hitchens. He had a book. I've debated Michael Shermer. He had a book. Those are the kind of people I want to debate. We were trying to set up a debate with Sam Harris, but it never worked out because he wanted a whole ton of money. And we don't have that. And look, I just debate when somebody invites me to a debate. If I can do it, I will do it. But last one I think I had was 2018. No, that's not. I had one last night with my wife. But the last formal debate was probably 2018 with Michael Shermer. So I'm totally open to doing debates, but I usually want to debate somebody that has something written on the topic. Otherwise, we're going to be like two ships passing in the night.
And one more
quick
one, or maybe not a quick one, but considering our culture today, all of the things that you presented, fantastic, strong evidence, a lot of our culture today seems to not really care about the evidence. So I mean, even if you present and say, hey, this is true, these are contradicting statements, if you have culture, especially younger people today who say, well, we don't care about that, it's all about what we feel, the happiness quest, right?
Right.
How would you think through beginning to present to them if a presentation like this, though compelling and strong and powerful, doesn't reach them because they don't care? Is there a different route that we should perhaps consider?
Yeah, it's kind of the apathy question. You know, what do you do for people who don't care? And that's the hardest person to deal with. If I had a cure for apathy, first of all, I'd be a billionaire because I could get people to do what I wanted. And secondly, everyone would be a Christian because, again, I'd get people to become Christians. Apathy is the hardest thing to deal with. And I think about all you can do with somebody who's apathetic is ask them the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If they say no, all you can do is love them. And as I said before, love doesn't mean approval. It means caring for them, seeking what's best for them. And all you can do is plant seeds, stay in their life if you can, and then what might happen, not guaranteed, but what might happen when that person goes through a difficult time, because we all do, your phone is going to ring and that person's going to be on the other end. They're going to call you a person of spiritual depth when things go wrong. They're not going to call their atheist friends. What the atheist friend's going to say? Oh, stuff happens. There's no rhyme or reason to this, right? They're going to call you, and then there's an opportunity. When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. So all you can do is love them, show them the joy that you have in your life, plant seeds, and then wait.
Great.
Right?
Dr. Turek, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi, Dr. Turek. I'm Joshua.
Joshua, how are you?
I'm doing great.
We got all these biblical characters here tonight. This is amazing. Be strong. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I watched a lot of your videos, and I especially enjoyed your debate with Alex O'Connor.
Yeah.
And you also referenced a lot of ideas with Aquinas, but I'd like to turn to Kant for a second. Per Kant's transcendental idealism, it follows that the objects of experiences are mere appearances, and that the nature of things as they are in themselves is consequently unknowable to us. If there is a fundamental separation between our perceived phenomena and physical nomina, and that we are confined to our perceptions, how do your statements transcend this and see truth?
Okay, this is a great question. It may sound a little technical, but all modern philosophy goes through Immanuel Kant, and Immanuel Kant has probably affected your thinking more than Jesus has, even if you're a Christian. What? Because here's what Kant said, basically. Kant said, I'm unpacking that in modern language, in common language. Kant said you can't know the real world. That's how you can remember Kant. Because Kant said there's phenomena out there, but when the phenomena gets to your brain categorizes it in such a way that you can't know the real world. All you can know is what your brain does to it. So there's a bifurcation between the phenomena and what he called the noumena. Okay? You can't get at the real world. It's just phenomena. Here's the problem with Kant's whole philosophy. If he says you can't know the real world, what question are you going to ask him?
How do you know what you know right now?
How do you know that about the real world? Why can Kant know about the real world, but we can't? Right? So Kant's philosophy on that point is completely self-defeating, because he's telling you what the real world is like, and he's exempting himself from his own theory. Now, Kant was a theist, but I find that common in atheists today. Like, for example, an atheist will say that everyone's a molecular machine. But they don't think they're molecular machines, right? If they do, why should they believe the thought that everyone's a molecular machine? They came to that conclusion because physics told them that. Or, for example, Daniel Dennett, who teaches at Tufts University, he said consciousness is an illusion. One wonders if he was conscious when he wrote that, okay? Because he doesn't think his consciousness is an illusion. He needs his consciousness to write books to tell other people that consciousness is an illusion. But if consciousness is an illusion, how does he even know it's an illusion? Yeah. You've got to get outside of your consciousness to know, hey, this is just an illusion. So Kant, like Dennett, is self-defeating at its core. And if you go to chapter, I want to say it's chapter 2 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. It might be chapter 1 or 2. We deal with Kant's argument in there.
Awesome. And one more quick question. How do you reconcile Christian values and serving in something like the military?
Well, I did serve in the military, and I think if you want a good overview of values when it comes to serving in the military, just look up Augustine on just war theory. And my co-author, Dr. Norman Geisler, has a book called Christian Ethics, and he goes through just war theory. So that may be a more common way than trying to go back to Augustine. But as you know, in the scriptures, John the Baptist doesn't tell the soldier, the centurion, or the Roman soldier that he needs to get out of the military. He just says, hey, treat people fairly. And Jesus tells the centurion, I haven't seen better faith here in Israel other than this guy. He doesn't say, hey, you need to get out of the Roman army. He's not saying that. Look, the military, like the police force, is a way to protect innocent people from evil. If you go to Romans chapter 13, Paul says he, the ruler, doesn't bear the sword for nothing. His job is to protect innocent people from evil. Who's the ruler? Meaning, and his day it was the Roman emperor, but he had representatives in the army. In our country, we have a government, and we have representatives of that government in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and now the Space Force, the Coast Guard. And we also have them in police forces. Both of those groups of people are there to protect innocent people from evil. That's what they're there to do. Now, sometimes they don't do it well, we get that, but theoretically, that's what they're there to do, and most of the time they do it well. And without them, we'd have chaos. In fact, the police, without police, nothing else in society would work. Think about that. If you can't be secure in society, you're not going to engage in business, you're not going to engage in commerce, you're not going to engage in social activity, you're going to be locked down wherever you can be locked down to prevent people from hurting or stealing or killing you. You need the police. They're the ground of everything else that exists.
Awesome. Thank you
All
so
right,
much for your time.
Thanks. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hey, I'm Jack.
Go ahead, Jack.
So I'd like to preface this with, I think your presentation was really good.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to say I do not believe in God, and I have an argument to present, and I'm pretty curious to see what you're going to do with it.
Good, go ahead.
So this is called the God of the Gaps argument. I didn't make this up. But it essentially says that the universe is, like you said, awesome. There's so much we don't understand. It's beyond our comprehension. But science has made some of the incredible things that happen in our universe possible, like modern medicine, for example. If you went back to, say, when Christ was born and you said, hey, in 2,000 years we can bring people back from the dead, because people can die for a short amount of time and we can still bring them back. Or if I took my phone back, you know, some of these things could be considered godly acts, but we can do them now, and they're not godly acts. We just put a scalpel here and inject some morphine there, and there you go. You're brought back from the dead. Obviously, it's not that simple. So why doesn't that trend continue into things that you were calling godly acts?
Well, you're saying that if we continue to research, we're going to find scientific answers for everything, basically. The universe, let's just say the universe, for example. You're saying it's going to happen by natural law, right?
Not necessarily by natural law, but we will inevitably figure out more things as time goes on that are not necessarily God.
Okay, but if all of nature had a beginning, which is what the evidence seems to show, you can't have a natural cause for that because nature didn't exist. So it must be something that transcends nature that brought it into existence, correct?
We don't know that.
Why don't we know that? If space, matter, and time had a beginning, can it be a natural cause?
Sure. I mean,
How?
Who knows there's nature beyond what we experience, right?
Well, but that would be what we would call supernature. It's beyond our natural world. That's what the evidence seems to show. So if God did create the universe, what evidence would suggest that he did? Seems to me precisely what we have, that space, time, and matter came into existence out of nothing. So if that's the case, and that's what it appears to be, then you have a being outside the universe with the attributes we mentioned earlier, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent, who created this universe. That's what the evidence appears to show.
So anything beyond the beginning of the universe and everything here is considered God?
No, but the attributes apply to what could be God. There are other arguments which we haven't gotten into because we don't have time, but you can't go on an infinite regress of natural causes anyway. Let's suppose, for the sake of argument, there's natural causes beyond this, what some atheists call this local representation, right? And there's time prior to that. You can't still go on an infinite regress. Ultimately, you got to get back to a timeless, uncaused first cause. And this is even what Alexander Vilenkin pointed out, who believes in the multiverse. You probably heard of the multiverse, Jack, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Even he says, look, even if there is a multiverse, it still all needs an absolute beginning. You don't get rid of the need for an absolute beginning, even if there are other natural events before our universe came into existence. Another argument might be the composition argument. Everything that we know about is composed. It's made of parts. And anything that's composed is put together by some sort of composer. But you can't go on an infinite regress of composers. Ultimately, you got to get back to an uncomposed composer who isn't made of parts, who composes everything else. That would be another argument. Some of the arguments that I can't bring up here because I don't have time, I think are even better than the ones that I presented to you. But due to the fact that you have to have some base philosophical knowledge that most of us don't have, it's not something you can bring forth to a general audience. You have to go through a lot of philosophical training to really get the lingo down and the language down and the concepts down before people can understand them. I know I did before I could understand them. So it's not something you can present in a 2-hour seminar. But there is a really good book written by Ed Feser. I don't know if you heard that name, Jack.
No,
F-E-S-E-R. Teaches at Pasadena City College. He is a Catholic philosopher, used to be an atheist, became a theist. His 5 proofs of the existence of God goes through these metaphysical arguments where you don't even need any scientific import. One other thing I might suggest too is that it appears to me that science itself requires someone like God for order. Otherwise, these natural laws that we have, why do they exist? Why are they so persistent and consistent? So even if someone were to tell me, look, we figured out that life could arise from non-life without intelligence through natural laws, I'm still going to ask the question, where did the natural laws come from? And where do laws come from? They come from lawgivers. So ultimately, you can go back and you're ultimately going to find an uncaused first cause with a mind, it seems. Does that make sense?
What if I asked you who created God? I'm sure you've heard that one 1,000 times.
Sure. Well, I think the answer is no one, because he's the uncreated creator. Look, you've got to get back to an uncreated creator somewhere. And if space, time, and matter had a beginning, then whatever created time didn't have a beginning, right? Because he's not in time. So if he didn't create time, he's timeless, which means he didn't have a cause. So he is the uncaused first cause. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I don't know if you explicitly said this in your response there, but did you mention that God might not be the only uncaused first cause? It sounded to me kind of like you hinted at that.
No, you're going to ultimately get back to an uncaused first cause who's not composed, because you can't have 2 infinites. In fact, that's a good question, Jack. Give me just 1 second here, because this is brought up quite a bit. And if I can find it here, stand by for vectors, vector. Here it is, right here. You're going to get back to one ultimate being, because an infinite being lacks nothing. That's what we mean by an infinite being, an uncomposed mind, say. For 2 beings to differ, one must lack something the other has, but a being that lacks something is not infinite, therefore there can be only one infinite being. So you're going to get back to an infinite being, regardless of whether or not the Big Bang cosmology is right. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, Aristotle knew nothing about the Big Bang. Aristotle didn't know that there was a beginning to the universe. He thought it was eternal. He said, but you still need a cause every single second the universe exists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Now, I'm going to let other people
Okay.
speak.
Yeah, you can go to the back of the line and ask again, but let me ask you a question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. If you later give me your address, I will send you a book. I don't have any of the books here. They're at the bookstore selling them, but I'll personally send you a book if you'll read it. All right.
Thank you for your time, man.
All right. Thank you, Jack. Yes, sir.
Well, I hate to disappoint you. I don't have a biblical name, but my middle name is Lane, and so I like to say I'm comparing myself to William Lane Craig.
That's good, man. You're in good company.
What
is your name?
Lane.
That's your middle name or your first name?
My middle is what I go by. So.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right, go ahead.
So I was wondering what your thoughts were on the significance of, especially as it relates to Christianity being true, of the historical Adam. Because I know there's a huge debate going on about that.
Yeah, William Lane Craig has written a new book on that, and I am not going to comment on it because I haven't read it yet, and that wouldn't be fair of me to do so. But I know, I've heard him talk about it, and basically he traces the biblical Adam back to, say, I don't know, 500, 700,000 years, and that's his view. Now, since I haven't read the book, I can't really comment on it, but I obviously think there was a biblical Adam and Eve at some point. When? That's an open question.
Gotcha.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi, Dr. Turek. My name is Giovanni.
Hey, Giovanni.
I just have 2 small, quick questions.
Uh-huh.
So, are there consequences of having premarital sex?
What kind of consequences do you mean? Are there physical consequences, moral consequences?
Sure.
Okay.
Would I go to hell?
Well, you can be forgiven for any sin except blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which means you're rejecting Christ. But any sin can be forgiven. But we don't sin to go, I can just ask God for forgiveness when this is over, because that wouldn't that wouldn't indicate a changed heart, right? If you truly have trusted Christ and you're truly out of gratitude for what he's done for you, trying to follow him, because as he said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, then you wouldn't have and I'm not saying you have this, I'm just saying in general, people wouldn't say, well, I can sin and ask for forgiveness later, so I'm just going to go on sinning. In fact, Paul deals with that in Romans chapter 6, as you know. May it never be. We're not going to go on sinning so grace may abound all the more. We're not slaves to sin anymore. We're now following the Spirit. So you can be forgiven for anything, but there are consequences to sin for all of us, no matter whether we're saved or not. There's natural consequences of sin, too.
Sure. And then my last question is, how much of what happens to us in our daily lives happens for a reason?
Great question. If Christianity is true, and of course I think it is, Paul says in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say all things are good. There's a lot of bad and evil that happens to you and to all of us. But God can work it together for good even when we can't see the end from the beginning. In fact, this is one of the things that helped me with the problem of evil, because you see stuff that happens and you go, how could God allow this to happen, right? I don't see any good coming from, say, a baby dying. You know, so baby gets sick, the whole church prays, and the baby dies anyway. You go, oh, great God, thanks for that, right? Why did that happen? Well, I know why babies die in general because we live in a fallen world, but I can't tell you why that particular baby dies. But I can tell you why I can't tell you why. Because I'm in time, God is outside of time. There's something known as the ripple effect. Maybe a baby dying today ripples forward, because every event ripples forward to affect other events and other people. Maybe it ripples forward to, say, 500 years from now, bring forth a great evangelist who saves millions of people. I can't see that outcome, but God can. He's outside of time. So the ripple effect can help me trust God even when I can't see the outcome. This is why he says to Job, just trust me. This is the ripple effect you actually see, by the way, in Genesis chapter 50, even before then. You know, the Old Testament, Joseph, he's sold into slavery by his brothers because his brothers are jealous of him. And somehow, after he goes through a lot of pain and difficulty, he rises to prominence in Egypt. He puts a bunch of grain aside. The very brothers that sold him into slavery escape a famine in Israel. They come to Egypt to get food. Joseph sees them, and what does he say as soon as he sees them? The very brothers.
He forgives them.
Yeah, no, he says, you dirty rat, you're going to pay for what you did to me. No, he doesn't say that. He says, what God meant for evil, or what you meant for evil, God meant for good, the saving of many lives. In other words, here's evil done by these brothers that ripples forward to later help them. There you can see the ripple effect. Most of the time you can't. In fact, you can think of all the ripples that occurred for you to even be sitting here tonight. For you to be alive, your parents had to meet, their parents had to meet, their parents had to meet, their parents had to meet, right? You can't trace all those ripples, but God can. So yes, everything does happen for a reason, but we can't always find out what the reason is because we can't see the end from the beginning. Does that make sense?
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks, Giovanni.
Hello, Dr. Turek.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Noah.
Noah, beautiful! Look at this!
I listened to your the whole audiobook before I knew anything about this, and I was so happy that you are coming here.
Oh, well, thanks, Noah.
I had a question on a Bible verse I read last week.
All right.
It's Matthew 5:48, and it says, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." And I can't live a day being anywhere near perfect.
What's wrong with you, man? Come on. No, I agree with you. And I think the import of that is that Jesus is saying this is the standard, and by the way, you can't meet it. Only I can. He said, I did not come to abolish the law, but fulfill the law. So Jesus is perfect. He fulfills the law. He comes as a ransom. In fact, he says that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So he came as the perfect sacrifice, and he knew that we couldn't do it. He came as the perfect sacrifice, and so we trust in what he did. We can't make it on our own. You're absolutely right. I have the same problem you have.
Right. So it's saying that that when we accept Christ, we're basically blameless?
Yes, because he has taken our punishment from us, and he's given us his righteousness. You see, by the way, this is one of the problems with social media. Because when people post on social media, they post as if their life is perfect, don't they? That everybody's having a great time. That look at me, look at where I am, look at what I'm doing. And the rest of us are looking at going, my life isn't like that.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? And it actually makes you depressed. And so TikTok videos are perfect, but the rest of us aren't. Right? That's the problem.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Caden.
Hey, Caden, go ahead.
So I came up here with one question in mind, but I'm going to ask another one. So you have all this great evidence, and it has compelled me that I think I have to make the argument for mysticism here. C.S. Lewis has a wonderful piece called On Obstinacy in Belief, in which he explains the rationale behind people who maintain their faith in the, even in the face of great contrary evidence, which I don't believe there is. But, you know, Jesus tells us that in the end times, there will be deceptions that, if it were possible, could deceive the very elect, right? And so if your faith is based upon merely human reasons, well, couldn't someone reason you out of it?
If your faith is based on reason, couldn't somebody reason you out of it?
Right, don't you need some
Well, I think it's probably, I mean, it's possible, quite obviously, but I think it's much more possible that if your faith is based on your emotion can change much more quickly than the facts can. The facts can't change. Our perception of the facts can change. But one of the problems I think we have currently is that we believe based on emotion, and emotion can lead us astray. In fact, I think the most important verse in the Bible, other than the gospel itself, today is actually from Proverbs. It's Proverbs 4:23. It says, above all else, guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it. Our culture doesn't say guard your heart. Our culture says follow your heart.
Right.
I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if you follow your heart without moral restraint, you're going to wind up addicted, depressed, and ultimately dead. I know I would. You've got to restrain yourself from your heart's desires, especially when they cross moral lines. If you don't, there's going to be trouble. This is why C.S. Lewis famously said that for any kind of success in this world, quite a lot of restraint is going to be necessary. And so I would argue that I think we do have a witness of the Holy Spirit, if that somehow you want to qualify or you want to describe as mysticism, that witness of the Holy Spirit can give us assurance. However, I think if that's all you have, and then things really get difficult and you start questioning whether or not it's real, I think the evidence is something that you can rely on as a foundation for who you're putting your faith in.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting. We see two kind of trends in Christianity. You have one that says, lean not upon your own understanding, and then another that wants you to evaluate the evidence more. So,
well, that would lean not on your own understanding is congruent with the verse about don't follow your heart, to guard your heart. Because your heart is deceitful and wicked, said Jeremiah. In other words, it'll lead you astray. I know if I followed my heart every day, again, I'd already be dead. Okay, there's so many things I want to do on a whim, something I see, that I need to restrain myself. And if I don't, I'm not going to last very long.
Okay. Thank you.
Right? Thank you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Rhett.
Hey,
My
Rhett.
question for you is, how do you discern a moral truth from our own perception on morality?
A moral truth from our own perception on reality. Well, I think the essentials of morality are clear to just about everyone if our faculties are working well. And this is the case C.S. Lewis makes in The Abolition of Man and also Mere Christianity. So we shouldn't murder, we shouldn't steal, all these things that say the Ten Commandments talks about, particularly the second table. That everyone knows that regardless of whether they're religious or not. They know it, they just can't justify it unless God exists. And it would be hard not to know this. In fact, a friend of mine who teaches at UT Austin, 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗦, big long last name, wrote a book a number of years ago called What We Can't Not Know. We can't not know it's wrong to murder. We can't not know it's wrong to rape. We can't not know it's wrong to steal, these kind of things, right? It's called natural law. Now, there are moral issues that we might not know the answer to, right? And so there we've got to have a more of a what word am I looking for here? A less certain outcome, even with our opinions. This is what Paul talks about in Romans 14, where he says on disputable matters. If you have a conviction on something on a disputable matter, don't put that conviction on someone else. A couple of things he talks about in his day in Romans 14 are eating meat sacrificed to idols and drinking wine. If you think it's okay to do those things, fine, you can do it, but don't impose your will on someone else, and vice versa. If the other person thinks that's not good for them, they shouldn't try and impose that standard on you. So there are disputable matters. But on the big issues, I think everybody's quite clear on. Now, sometimes we don't want to be clear on it. Sometimes we want to suppress the truth to go our own way. But everybody intuitively knows on the big issues what's right and what is wrong.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Rhett. We have to be done at 9:30? Okay, let's see how many we can get through real quick. Yes, no, maybe, could be. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Luke.
Luke.
My question is, so if somebody believes in a deity or a higher being, but not our God, what are some reasonable steps or things that we can talk to them about logically to see the way that we see in the God that we see?
Well, some of the stuff we talked about here, I would just ask questions. For example, if there is no God, why does anything exist? And just see what they say. Ask the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? In fact, there's a great book written by a friend of mine, Greg Koukl, called Tactics, which has some of these questions in them that you can have a conversation with people on. Because you really want to see what they believe and see what kind of worldview they have before you try and offer some evidence for your own worldview anyway. You've got to see where people are. So I would just ask a lot of questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Why do you think that's true? So just ask a lot of questions and take an interest in people and see where it goes.
All righty, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot. One more is okay? We're almost there. All right, sorry, this will be the last one. I can talk to you guys afterward. Not a problem.
Okay, so my name is Samuel, but I have a question from my friend who had to leave early.
Okay.
And I'm going to just read exactly what he
Asking for a friend, sure.
More or less. Okay. I'm going to read exactly what he said so I don't put words in his mouth.
Okay, hold on. Just before we go, I want to tell you that tomorrow night we'll be at University of Louisville, and so there'll be more Q&A there. So if any of you are going to be in Louisville tomorrow night, we'll be there. If not, you can watch it on the live stream. So thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah. So he said, what is the standard by which you can say Christianity is true? He feels you've given mostly dubious reasons for why a godless explanation of the world doesn't seem agreeable to you, but not a direct reason why it's insufficient for someone to accept it. He says also that atheists don't have to provide an explanation for everything. Atheists admit that they don't know why something like the Big Bang happened, but it doesn't necessarily mean God is any better explanation. So the question at the top was, what is the standard by which you say Christianity is true?
Well, if he hasn't been here for the presentation, then
he was here for the presentation. He had to leave before Q&A.
Well, I'm not sure what else to say other than the evidence I just went through, but I disagree that atheists have no burden of proof for explaining the world the way the world is. Okay, atheists try and say, well, I just lack a belief in God. Well, if they're just saying I lack a belief in God, they're not saying anything about the real world. They're just talking about what's between their ears. Well, so what? You know, this water bottle lacks a belief. Regardless of what you believe, whether you're a Christian, atheist, Muslim, Buddhist, I think there are things that we all need to explain why the world is the way it is. Why does the world exist to begin with? Why is it fine-tuned? Why are there objective moral values? Why can we think? Why is there reason? Laws of logic, consciousness. Why does it appear that a man who claimed to be God actually did rise from the dead based on the evidence? Why do all those things? What's the best explanation for all those things? And I think whether you're an atheist or not, you still have to have an adequate explanation for those things. Maybe there's some atheistic explanation for it. Okay, let me hear it. I haven't heard it. And in fact, let me just use one analogy here. If you're a Christian and I'm an atheist and we come across a dead body and we know it's been murdered, and I say, and you say, I think I know who the suspect is. And I go, I lack a belief that your guy is the suspect. And you're going to go, okay, well, who do you think it is? And I go, I don't have to have any theory as to who it is. I just lack a belief your guy is the true suspect. Am I a good detective if I stop right there? No. A good detective is going to say, okay, I don't think your guy is the guy, but I'm looking at the evidence and I think maybe this guy is the guy. But I'm not going to end my detectiveness, if you will, by just saying, I think you've got the wrong guy. I still have to explain why there's a murdered body there. And that's what I'm saying with atheists. They still have to explain all the stuff that I'm trying to explain. So what's their answer? If they're just going to say, I don't know, well, look, it's easy to smell a rotten egg. It's hard to lay a better one. Okay? If you think my egg is rotten, tell me why. But what's your egg as an atheist? You know? Sorry, I just changed the characters. Now I'm the Christian, you're the atheist.
Sure.
Sorry, I messed the whole thing up. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sure he'll appreciate that answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you much, Samuel. Hey, John, tell people where they can really see the thing, if you will, on Wednesday night. What room is it going to be in? So...
It's over in Whitehall.
It's in Whitehall?
If you follow us on Instagram, it's 4 to 5:30 on Wednesday.
4 to 5:30 on Wednesday. I hope you guys can join Ratio Christi and learn from one another and learn more from this great organization. So thank you so much for being here, folks. God bless.